The meeting is now open. Adequate notice of the meeting was provided by posting a copy of the time and place on the municipal clerk's bulletin board and mailing a copy of same to the press and the Kentman County Herald on January 4th, 2018. Will everyone please rise to salute the flag? Okay, we'll start today's work session with the Administration and Finance Committee. Mrs. Lane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I will turn it over to our Administrator, Jill Coucho.
Okay, first up, the engineers report, please.
Thank you. On the capital project front, we conducted a pre-construction meeting on September 19th for the 82nd Street Tennis Court building project, and the contractor is set to begin next week contingent upon receiving building permits. The construction work for the 95th Street bathroom renovation is ongoing and on schedule. The contractor has completed the interior demolition and the floor plumbing. He is scheduled to finish the floor restoration and interior wall framing next week. Next, the new GIS elevation certificate map was successfully launched on the borough's website last Friday. Upon authorization of the next phases, we will upgrade this site with tax maps and utilities. Lastly, we are finalizing the 2018 utility and road program, and we'll be requesting a motion to bid at the next council meeting. I have a meeting this Thursday with Grant to do a final walkthrough and review of the plans for bidding. In regards to grants, the fiscal year 2019 NJDOT municipal aid roadway application for the reconstruction of the 300 block of 88th Street was successfully submitted on September 7th. Last item, just to report on it, although it's not in the report, we received our first 2 bulkhead applications with the new ordinance in effect late last week, and we'll be completing those reviews and getting those letters out tomorrow. That is my report.
Okay. Any questions for Mark? Hearing none. Tax collector.
Hello, everyone. In October, we'll be sending out the added assessments for taxes. The direct debit applications were up to about 700, and they're still coming in. Utilities, we're collecting the summer reads, we're sending out delinquencies, and we're working on month-end for both departments. Anybody have any questions for me? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Okay, tax assessor.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to report on added assessments today. The 2018 total for prior year 2017 and 2018 current year up to October 1st is $52,143,600 compared to last year, prior year 2016 and current year 2017 was $36,858,800. So there was a almost $0.3 million increase in added assessments. I'm still working on those 6 tax appeals at state tax court, and we're trying to negotiate them. It's ongoing. That's all I have. Any questions? Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Margaret.
Okay, construction and zoning.
All right. The first thing, the demo permits and new house permits that were issued as of last September compared to this year, there were 8 new homes and 11 demolitions last September, 0 new homes and 6 demolitions this year. So there's a difference, but I think it's just we're always going to have that up and down trend anyway. So could it be a result of the ordinance? I don't know, technically, I think it's just, we'll see a difference this month coming up as far as new homes issued, because we have a bunch on file ready to be released. So, Regatta Bay is almost under roof, which is very good, so we don't have any issues with leaks in that building anymore. after probably Thursday, they should have the roof on that thing.
What did happen there?
I don't know whether, say, a comedy of errors or just a series of events that just kind of snowballed. I think they more than likely just dropped the ball in preparing for a situation like that. They should have done a little bit better logistically as far as making sure that they were going to have this thing watertight before we did get rain. You know, we couldn't predict the weather, couldn't predict that rain with what we got. They could have probably done some things to mitigate it by just covering it, tarping it a little bit better, but they tried to run fast to get it set up to where they didn't have that problem, and it got a hold of them. So, right now, they're looking pretty good, so we shouldn't have any issues with it.
Okay.
Or they shouldn't have any issues with it, yeah. What are you looking for?
He was asking, he had asked in a letter if he could do that in 2 phases to get the main body of the structure done and the single-family residence done, and then do the second phase after next season. But I don't think that's his target right now. He had approached us with a letter for that, and we said, yeah, sure, you can, just as long as, so I guess that means he's going to take into next season, definitely into next season, and he was trying to alleviate as much of the downtown congestion as he could. I said, yes, if that's what you need to do, we would do it in phases from my office.
Can you just tell
What
us?
he has,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, what he has already constructed, that should be closed up soon. So the
Yes.
bulk of the work after that is inside. Is that correct?
Yes.
So why would they need 2 seasons to complete it?
Well, there's no staging area for that job either. Just the way he's tying the 2 buildings together with materials and everything, it's a very awkward job to do like that, with how much,
I'm surprised he's willing to do that. That cost him money.
right, I don't think he's gonna. He
Oh, you don't
originally
think he's
asked.
going to
He originally
now?
asked if
All
he
right.
could, and then I think he's shifting gears now to just do the whole
okay.
project.
I understand. Thank you.
He should be able to get that thing closed in
Pretty
fairly
quick,
quick, yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, it should be spring.
Is anybody monitoring that? Because that site, the dumpster's never covered unless it has been in the last day or 2. The dumpster's always uncovered.
Within the last couple of days, it has been.
It has
Because he
been.
was told, yes,
I
yes.
haven't been down this week yet, but I know last week, several times, it was always uncovered and there was stuff all over the sidewalks.
I think it was laying inside of it a couple of times and not wrapped over the edge so you could see it. So,
Okay,
there's
but it's
a couple
covered
of
now.
job sites that are like that that I just noticed today, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, we have called him.
Okay.
Get it covered, yes.
Okay.
Can I ask, what is actually going above? I didn't look at any of the plans. I'm just watching it happen.
Single family.
All the way
It's-
across,
it's
that's
just one unit, all the way
one-
across
that's-
the whole thing.
One unit.
Yeah,
Wow.
one unit.
8 bedrooms?
Pardon me?
8 bedrooms?
One
And that's it.
big unit.
Okay. Another question, we were chatting, and we should know this answer. What is the cutoff time for construction?
6. It's 8 to 6 right now in the off-season.
In the off-season, it's 8 to 6. No, no. 8 to 6.
The time.
Construction,
8 a.m. to 6
Okay.
p.m.
it really is 6 o'clock?
6
Yeah.
p.m., yeah.
Six
I always
p.m.
thought it was
It's always
5.
been 6 p.m.
Has it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Ray, as you know, I was contacted by a contractor who thought that it was 6 o'clock and said that he called the dispatcher and was told that it's 7 o'clock for shutdown. And he has since emailed me and said, okay, when I see it at 7 o'clock, do I call the police or do I call construction?
The police, he definitely
Okay.
wants, we're not there, so he has to call police, yes.
Okay.
After hours, definitely, yeah. If it's during the day with us, we
Well,
can,
I suppose it'd be after hours.
yeah.
Was that project permitted before the bulkhead ordinance took effect?
Yes.
there's no bulkhead there.
Yes, there is.
They don't have a bulkhead there.
Yeah,
They don't have
No?
no, they
Well,
don't have a
the
bulkhead.
back side of the other building does.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it becomes one building now.
Right.
They're tying the 2 structures together, so.
So technically,
yes,
it
it was.
does.
Technically, it
The
does.
one, the building that was, there were 2 separate structures at one time, now they connected the 2. so it becomes one structure now. And they do have
Okay.
bulkhead frontage.
So,
Yeah.
so they have a bulkhead, but they were permitted beforehand?
On 99?
Correct.
Yeah,
Not
I
99.
understand.
It's 90.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, you guys have anything else?
Well, we got the regular, the yacht club, the review's complete, we're just waiting on the engineering to approve the revisions from what the engineer asked for in the resolution for the yacht club, but our construction plan review is done.
Everyone signed off on it
Yes.
as of right now, except for some things for fire.
Transfers, last year I had 16 in the month of September, this year 15. 3 of them last year and 3 this year were waivers for transfer inspections for demos. So that's coming, the construction office hasn't seen that yet, but there'll be 3 more demos coming up for October, for new homes in October. Next door, the police station, Jesse was just in our office about a half hour ago, and he wants to, next week, remove the apron in the back parking lot of this building, and it won't be re-released till the project's done in December. So we will be losing the back parking as soon as he does that. We're gonna lose access to the back parking lot. And so he just requested that about a half hour ago. And I guess that's it. Tennis court building, the engineers are working on. Got just a couple minor issues. Jerry Blackman was just in our office right about the same time Jesse was, and he's gonna address a couple minor things. And,
I sent you an email for that.
and I guess that's it. Any other questions? And anything else pending?
All right.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, next is CFO.
Hello. I was just going to go over the 3 ordinances that related to the issuing of debt tonight. The first resolution is authorizing the bond anticipation note, and that is just for water sewer capital projects, does not include general capital. And it is $78,000, essentially it's the same note that we issued this time last year, less $78,000 that were required as of down payment, or payment. The next ordinance is the form of the $28,974,000 general obligation bond, and that merely lists the structure of the bond as far as when the maturity schedule is. And with that maturity schedule, there'll be no increase in the debt service in 2019 because of this bond. And we expect the rate to be around 3%. We had a rating call today, so we'll find out what our rating is next week. But it sounds like we're going to stay at an AA+, and we can't go to the AAA because the county unemployment rate is still around 10%, and that seems to be the hard cutoff for them. That has to be below 10% before our rating will increase anymore. And then the third resolution is the ordinances, the capital ordinances that are funded by this bond. And it lists all the capital improvements over the last several years and the amount. And if there's any questions?
Next up, Borough Clerk.
The cash report for the month of August is cash balance $985,393.63. Cash disbursements for the month $6,716,885.26. In the Water and Sewer Department, beginning cash balance $1,366,765.19, and the cash disbursements $823,288.51. The Borough Clerk's office for the month of September, total taken in $3,994. And in the construction office there, total fees $16,356. That's all.
Okay. Next would be Planning Board report.
Planning Board met last on Monday, September 24th. 3 of our members were absent, so we tabled all discussion at that time. And the next time we meet is October 22nd, and the Planning Board engineer will be bringing forward a draft of an amendment to the master plan to adopt the affordable housing element provision. Basically, the things we're going to be discussing later tonight will be discussed on October 22nd in the Planning Board. It was a quick meeting because we were down a couple of members, and that was it.
completes everything
One
for
other thing
ANF.
from that meeting is Andrew Katniss disseminated a draft form of the revision for proposed front and side yard stair setbacks to the members of the board, and I believe sent it out by email to those that weren't there. For our review, I would presume we'll review that at the next meeting and bring it to council within.
That'll be on the agenda for the October 22nd meeting, and that was the discussion that we tabled because we didn't have, we were missing so many members. Although we had a quorum, we just feel it's important that everybody be there to discuss the items, so we tabled it.
Okay, so that's everything for ANF.
Public Works.
Good afternoon. Any questions on the monthly report? No?
Question. I see where the beach mats are cleaned off Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Since most of the public goes down there on the weekends, is there a possibility we can switch one of those days, maybe Friday to Saturday? So they'll be cleaned for the weekend?
They're supposed to be done on Fridays, depending on the wind.
I know Fridays,
they're
but
coming.
then, yeah,
By
that's,
Friday afternoon, they could be covered.
that's what I mean. So could we switch it and have them clean them off Saturday morning rather than Friday?
We don't have employees in
Staff?
on Saturdays or Sundays.
That's what I thought. We only have a few employees. I was asked that question. And we only have a few employees on the weekend, so it's difficult to give them all the jobs. But, I mean, we clean them off, and then, depending on weather, like Grant said, they'll be covered in a few hours. So it's difficult for the challenge people or residents and
I know the only mats that are kept in place year-round, 95th Street, 95th Street, so they're the only ones that are getting the attention on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday are the ones to be concerned with. If it's all that manpower allows for and they're getting them on Friday, it just depends on, theoretically, you could do them Saturday morning, and then by Saturday afternoon, they're covered,
True.
Correct.
Very true.
kind of at the whim of the wind.
Refresh my memory, did we ever get an answer when we were talking about the amount of hours at the last meeting on the concerts? This says 129 hours for the,
That's total for all the employees.
that's all for the whole summer?
No, that's one event.
That's what the answer was? Okay, wow.
That's set up, that's
Each time.
at
we
the
set up-
event, and then the takedown
Each
after the event.
Tuesday, that's what the time we spent to set
No,
up?
it starts Tuesday morning. Yeah.
For that event, I'm
and it
just, I'm
runs
saying, for
through
that event.
Wednesday morning, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I think we all talked about, was it that many hours, or was it accumulation over the summer? So that's just for the concerts. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of things that are going on right now. Next bulk trash pickup will start on Tuesday, October 9th, because Monday is a holiday. And we are now in the winter schedule, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday pickups, with commercial being every day. In the streets department, we have some sidewalk ADA crossings being worked on right now. We have a contractor tearing them out and putting them ADA standards in. We have quite a few of them on the south end of town that there wasn't ADA compliance back then when they put them in, so we contracted to have them done. So the pans will be put in, and the dimpled mats that you see on all the crosswalks will be installed. Hopefully that'll be done by the end of next month. All the parking meters and kiosk machines are offline and shut down. All the kiosks on the beach lot, marina, and the 300 block will be removed because of the flooding area. The 200 block, they're electric, where the other ones are all solar. So we're gonna try a shrink wrap on the ones on 96th Street, 200 block, and see how that works. Just keep the elements outside of, there's computers and mechanical parts inside that we don't want the weather to damage, so we're gonna try to shrink wrap. If that doesn't work, then we're gonna probably get canvas covers for them for next year. All the beach concession stands have been taken off. All the electric has been removed. The ADA mats are up, except for the 95th Street access. Point Road is open, and the debris from the Hobie Cats that were damaged during the last storm have been removed. The Buildings Department is still working on the LED lights at Public Works. Everything except for the Packer Barn, which is on the 81st Street side of our shop area, and the Marina Pole Barn still need to be completed. They also are working on the metal pole barn roof on the 80th Street side. It's a metal roof, and unfortunately, we're getting complaints from the condos that are behind it about the rusted roof. So we already had it in place that we were going to acid wash it and paint the roof because it is metal. So they're working on that right now. And then the grounds department is doing routine cuts because of the weather, the nice mild weather. Holly Path is open at the bird sanctuary. Hanging baskets were taken down and the fall decorations replaced them. And then I have for water and sewer, water meters should be completed today for the reads, and then they'll go back and do their rereads on the next couple of weeks once Deborah has that all calculated out. And see if she has any discrepancies, then we'll go back and reread whatever she deems necessary. Stormwater vaults and pipes have been flushed for the season, and once the rereads are done, they're going to get into flushing hydrants and testing the hydrants for pressures, which are required by the state. And that's my report.
Fine.
Any questions?
Any questions for Grant?
Thank you, sir.
Okay,
Thank you, Grant.
thank you.
And utilities?
Okay, I have a brief summary on meeting on September 28th. This past Friday, the mayor, Charles, and I met with representatives from Atlantic City Electric, so they could provide us with an update on their current projects as well as any planned projects in the near future. They will be finishing their last section of the distribution feeder project of the Hereford feeder, which is to improve reliability by reducing the number of customers that could be impacted when an outage occurs by adding another feeder to the distribution system. In order to have the additional feeder, they will need additional equipment and feeder ties, so if an outage does occur, they can switch the electric load from one feeder to the other. They had originally planned, and they had originally come to council to run this new feeder line down parts of First Avenue. But after hearing the concerns from council, they did revise their plan, which eliminated the need to do any replacement of poles on First Avenue. They are now instead utilizing the existing metal poles on Second Avenue. Weather permitting, the tentative construction timeline to start is early November and to finish by the end of the year. They will install another deck, which includes cross arms, insulators, and wire, which would start running on Second Avenue from 80th Street to the middle of the block of 93rd and 94th Street. One feeder tie will be on 81st Street from 2nd to 3rd Avenues, where they will be replacing existing wood poles with 45-foot poles. Some distribution work will be required to two 40-foot replacement wood poles on 93rd Street west on 2nd Avenue. And as part of the feeder tie improvement, there will be two new 50-foot wood poles installed, one on 2nd Avenue south of 90th Street and the other on 2nd Avenue south of 85th Street. In addition to that, Atlantic City Electric's planning on another reliability improvement project, which will be their recloser saturation program, which, if an outage would occur, 500 customers or less will be impacted instead of the entire feeder being out of electric service. Less customers would be impacted by the outages when these reclosers are installed. The tentative schedule for that work is the first quarter of 2019. And tonight I did provide council with copies of the maps that show the route and indicate what poles they will be adding equipment to, the location of the additional poles also. I don't know if Judy or Charles want to add anything to that summary.
That's
Shall I
pretty
have a
good.
question? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just want a bottom line here. Every pole that will be replaced or added they'll all be wood. There will be no more metal poles added or replaced. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? And the
Yeah,
other,
the
oh,
two, I couldn't make that meeting, as you know, Friday.
Right.
Those two 50-foot poles. like You
correct,
said, are
The new
what,
ones.
Second Avenue?
That's correct.
right.
And that's in addition to what we talked about at the initial meeting.
Those two
Um,
poles are the only two
yeah.
new poles.
Yeah, I think in the initial meeting, when they were going down First Avenue, they had anticipated the need for 2 additional poles also. So that number hasn't changed. It's
Okay, but
just
then
obvious,
we had a meeting subsequent to that I went
Yes.
to. And then, so those
Yes.
poles we discussed in that meeting as well.
Correct.
They were there. So these
Yes.
aren't 2 additional poles.
they're not 2
No.
additional.
No,
These
no,
are
no.
ones that they
Part
had
of the original.
disclosed.
And they're on Second Avenue, where again? 85th?
Corner of,
Yeah.
85th and 90th.
90th. South, on Second Avenue, south of 90th Street and south of 85th. Pretty much on the corner. When you look at the map, you can see it's on the corner of each of those.
one is
And they will be sending notices out to those property owners, but in addition, the borough will also be sending out information.
They're sending notices out all along
Yes,
the entire route of the project. And then in addition, we stated that we would also reach out to the homeowners where the 2 new wooden poles are going, in addition to whatever notification Atlantic City Electric was doing.
Does does it impede the owners at those 2 locations, those poles?
We specifically said there is no driveway, is there? And we were assured that they do not, they're not in front of a driveway.
That's why I asked.
that's
So is
why we
this-
asked also.
Was this a utility meeting or a special meeting?
This was,
Not you.
it was not, no, it was a Phase 2 electric pole meeting.
it's really an update. Atlantic City Electric wanted to update us as to timing, logistics. And
Yes,
I have
they
to say, they were pretty forthright, and, it's worth mentioning, the First Avenue route that they originally wanted to take was a much more economical way for them to achieve what they're trying to achieve.
No, it wasn't a
So-
special committee. Really, what happened here is it started from Planning Board, and Mr. Parzak had expressed interest in joining it from Planning Board, because the initial meetings were with Paul Cates and with Charles and myself, and Ray had expressed interest in attending, and it was how we could, different changes we could make in the master plan moving forward, and also looking for some sort of a price as far as undergrounding these, as far as the civil engineering versus the electrical engineer. If you remember, that's how all of these conversations began, was coming out of the planning board, and how do you get these things into the master plan? And also, if you remember too, the planning board authorized Mott Associates X amount of dollars to do a feasibility study. So the feasibility study is what started us meeting with Atlantic City Electric to discuss this. And then this was the final part. They contacted us, and just correct me if I'm wrong, so we were moving forward with those feasibility studies, and we asked them also to do a map that would show the easiest places in town to underground wiring and so on and so forth. So we were having meetings along the way, and probably I want to say the last 6 months, maybe 8 months. And then this came to be as a result of they want to inform the public what they're coming now to do Phase 2, which we started talking about probably maybe 2 years ago, is when we started to discuss Phase 2. And this came about as a result, if you remember, of the, actually, I believe it was the Chappaqua meeting that was at the movie theater, where they introduced us to what Phase 2 was going to be, and that it was going to be along First Avenue, and many people spoke, and what they did is they initially were going to be doing Stone Harbor Phase 2, followed by Avalon. They flip-flopped that. They did Avalon first. They worked on a revision for Phase 2 in Stone Harbor. This is the final coming forth of the revision of Phase 2.
And it's much less intrusive than the first, their first go-around with it. I think they're, I think after the go-around we had initially a few years ago, I think they're much more sensitive to Stone Harbor's.
One of the most interesting things they said is, had they done Phase 2 along First Avenue and put in the 3-feeder, moving forward on First Avenue to underground wiring would be extremely expensive. And they said now, with this feeder coming along Second Avenue and along the steel poles, now those folks along First Avenue that are interested in undergrounding, it's 1/3 the price for them to move forward. Had they done Phase 2 on First Avenue, then you wanted to underground, it would have been triple the price for the property owner.
So we saved them money.
We saved.
No, we didn't.
No.
Property owner.
Property owner,
Yes.
right.
Property.
Right, and actually, Atlantic City Electric loses because they would have gotten the work and the money. Right, oh, definitely saved, yes. So property owners who want to do that along First Avenue, yes, it saves them probably 60%, maybe more, with this going just along the steel poles.
I have one question as I'm reading this. So the pole is between 85th and 86th, right? The map, it looks like it's beyond,
It's the corner, yes.
okay, and then the other one is between 91st and 90th,
Yes,
correct? Okay.
yes.
Correct.
I just wanted to make sure
Yes.
that I was like. where the
Closer to
pole-
90th.
Okay, fine, thank you.
And closer, both of them would be closer to the north end of that
Right,
block.
exactly,
You can see the small circle P8 and P42.
right, that's what I'm looking at.
They're the two new wooden poles that will be 50 feet
50.
in height.
Okay, thank you.
Going back to what we were talking about, saving the people that might want to underground on First Avenue, is there a way that we or they can advertise this or share this with the people on First Avenue?
Sure, I mean, we could, yes. I don't remember, if you remember, it was along most of the beach blocks is where we saw it was actually, like even along there is where it's, would be the easiest for them to underground. They did say, we did have a conversation about talking to the homeowners, but that may be, because you remember something was said, make sure the homeowners are aware in case anybody's interested in undergrounding, but was, you remember? Or was that maybe 93rd Street? When we were talking, it just threw it out there and said, make sure that you're aware of what this big project we're doing on 93rd Street. Anybody who wants to underground, jump in and take advantage of what's happening there. But sure, I mean, to just say, hey, because Phase 2 moved,
Well, I'm not saying you have to explain it, but to
Right.
let them know that if most of the street ends, by memory only, at the beach ends, most of them now are underground because there's a lot
Right.
of new houses that have been put up. But if the people in between the streets know that,
Oh.
you know, this can
I
go,
don't-
this can go.
I don't think the cost went down for them. It's just the cost for them to do this remain the
Right.
same, as opposed to if this feeder came down First Avenue, the price would
Would've
have
been-
gone up
Would have been, right.
tripled.
Didn't we
So-
have somebody from 83rd request that if?
they already took care of it, I believe, down at
It's
83rd
already-
Street.
It's
Yep.
already.
Yes,
done?
that group of, those folks all got together and they did underground.
That was Cat?
Yes, the people there, yes. Is there anything else on that that you can remember? Any
No,
other
I just-
questions on that?
My point was only that it seemed from this meeting and previous meetings that Atlantic City Electric's trying to be a good neighbor, and I think, as Ray put it, they're accommodative, so I think if this redundancy and this reliability is what they're doing, they did it in the best way possible.
The other thing they said was something about those reclosures, that there will be less of them, significantly less in town.
Than they originally proposed, right? The individual that was responsible for the design of it went back and really adjusted it to keep it at a minimum for Stone Harbor.
So the ordinance that's on the agenda in the next meeting, that's for the guide wire up by the rec field that we had talked about before.
The lease agreement, correct?
That's what that's for.
Yes.
I suppose I shall break from the regular order. Come up to the podium.
Does the 50-foot pole give obstruction to anybody else? I mean,
Does it say that again?
a 50-foot pole, all right, it may not affect the beach block, but what about everybody that bought a house that's in line with that pole? I mean, with the equipment that they're going to have on the pole, is it going to obstruct the view of others?
I do not know.
I mean, they're building houses for $4 and $5 million down there. I mean, if I show up one day and all of a sudden I got a transformer and a bunch of stuff on
And there's going to be a
pole,
50-foot pole there. The only answer, honestly, to have for that is it's necessary to handle the span of what's coming in.
Right.
So, I mean, you have to, and again, you know, not being unsympathetic, you just have to say, look at the trade-off of coming all the way down First Avenue and putting in the triple feeder and everything that would have happened versus what's going to take place now.
But the bottom line is Atlantic City doesn't care. I mean, you're not going to get any sympathy from anybody in this town for what they do.
Right, right.
And they sat here 2 years ago and lied through their teeth about metal
Right.
poles going down First Avenue. So they may have something that you're satisfied with on a piece of paper, but they'll flip in a minute, these guys.
Well, that's too, though, why we said we wanted to notify those homeowners that are going to be directly in front of these poles, in addition to whatever Atlantic City Electric is sending out, to make sure that they're aware that it's coming and, you know, we can let them
I
know.
cover the surrounding area. I'm telling you, there's angles, people have angles to the water. And if that thing is loaded up with equipment, transformers, and the rest
Yeah, I
of
hear
it,
you.
you
Yeah.
can hear it.
Yeah.
That's why I asked my question previously. That's part of what I meant. Are they impeding that property?
Yeah.
So-
Well, not only that.
Right.
I mean, there's probably a number of.
A number of houses, right, depending on which way a deck is situated or
Exactly.
something to that effect.
Exactly. Right? But no sympathy for Atlantic City.
Mm-hmm.
Till anything's done with these guys, you don't know what you got.
I won't argue with that.
Me neither.
Yes. Yes, you have to.
Bernadette Parzik, 9925 Sunset. So then, after this phase is done, you said there's another phase to be done in January, starting in January?
Then this Piermont project was Phase 1 and Phase 2. So then what they're talking about is not either, it's not the Piermont project any longer. What it is they're going to be putting in additional, what they're calling reclosures, I believe, if I'm using the terminology correctly. And what they're trying to do is narrow down, if electricity goes out and 1,500 people are affected, they're putting in these reclosures where instead of 1,500 people being connected, you flip switches, you do this, that, the next thing, and now only 500 people
So
are out.
are there new
So they're
poles
now-
involved with that?
No, they're all going, and there's reclosures on existing poles all throughout town.
Okay.
It's not like a brand-new piece of equipment that's being mounted on poles that we don't already have in town. They're putting additional ones up. They did assure us, and I hear you, John, but they did assure us that they've minimized the number that will go up.
They will provide us with that number, obviously, before they.
Well,
We
I
asked them
think,
for
I
that.
think that you said that the route is, you distributed a map with the route on it. Didn't you say that?
Yes, that's the feeder, that's the Piermont feeder. That's not these reclosures, because that's not a particular route. That is going to be something that isolates a particular
Oh, I
area,
thought the
particular
map
amount of customers,
Went to the
homes.
reclosure thing.
No, that's not. That was something, what happened is while we were there, then when this meeting was done, Ronnie Town said to Bob Wilcox, tell them what's coming next. And they said, it's part of their commitment, Exelon's commitment to sustainability and what's the other word they always use? Resiliency. Redundancy, and so on and so forth. And that is what they're doing throughout their customer base, is putting in these reclosures to minimize the impact when there is an outage.
Same existing poles.
Same existing poles, yes. Yep.
We have these units already throughout town. I think he estimated 6, but that was a rough estimate.
6 new ones.
6 new.
Yeah, they definitely said under a dozen.
Yeah, it was single digits, but that they will inform us, obviously.
Anybody else? Anybody, council? Questions? Anything else, utilities?
Nothing, I don't have anything.
Okay. Then we're moving on to our COA discussion. I'm going to hand that off to Mark Caravan, perhaps, to bring us, kind of give a little bit of an introduction as to how we arrived at our ordinances and so on and so forth, and introduce our council and so on.
So Stone Harbor filed a declaratory judgment action a while ago relative to getting an extension in our COA protection from builders' remedies lawsuits. We negotiated through our COA counsel, who's here to address what the changes are, a deal with Fair Share Housing, and our immunity is extended to, is it 2025, Michael? July of 2025. Yeah, so if you would come up, please, and you could explain the terms of what our agreement was with them, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Jadziniak. I'm with a firm called Serenian and Associates. Our office is in Brielle. We are the only firm in the state that practices exclusively in the Mount Laurel arena, and we also only represent municipalities and planning boards. Right now, I think we have about 60 towns. I personally represent around 25 towns. So we have been traveling around the state for the last several years after the Supreme Court deemed COA to be basically out of business. A lot of that time has been spent trying to negotiate settlements for all of our clients, and we did that for Stone Harbor. Stone Harbor was in a very good situation to begin with because you were one of the 68 towns in the state that had gotten COA approval of your Round 3 plan. So you had a really good track record. And it also so happens that one of the representatives for Fair Share Housing Center, the Affordable Housing Advocacy Group that has a statewide practice, one of them summers in the area, so he was very familiar with the borough also. So really what we did was we took a look at the borough's existing plan, the plan that COA had approved already. And Fair Share Housing Center requested some changes, some amendments to the existing ordinances in the plan, and they were very minor in my judgment. They were very minor, very acceptable, and Mr. Caravan and I had really worked in tandem on that, so I think he'll agree that this was really not a heavy lift. So what we have on the table right now is Judge Johnson issued the borough basically a final judgment of compliance and repose, which will be, it's conditional in a way, meaning that there are certain actions that the planning board and the borough governing body need to take. One of them would be to adopt the amended ordinances that we have on the table right now. The first one is an ordinance that amends certain provisions to the existing Mount Laurel overlay that is basically an overlay zoning ordinance over the business district. I believe we expanded it slightly, and we also, Fair Share Housing Center pointed out some ambiguities in the existing ordinance that he wanted to clear up, and I believe we also added a third floor option to that. Now, prior to the meeting, I was speaking with Mr. Caravan and the mayor a question about that specific provision, and my reaction was that it's required for you to do 5 units, and if you do 5, it's, you know, there's a percentage of affordable. But I thought about it a little bit more, and I wanted to amend that answer slightly. The underlying zoning, because it's an overlay zone that we're talking about, the underlying zoning is still in effect. So I don't know the answer to this, but if there was a right to build residential over commercial in the original zoning ordinance, that would remain unchanged. What the Mount Laurel overlay ordinances do, and I have probably 15 towns that are in the same situation, and shore towns included, is if someone chooses to build 5 or more residential units, then they have an obligation to create a percentage of, you know, Mount Laurel units, which would be 15% if they're rental units and 20% if they're what we call for sale units, fee simple units. So I just wanted to make sure that the mayor and everybody was clear about that. It's really, the overlay is not something that's mandatory. The reason why we do that is Fair Share requests that we do that because in case they want to be able to entice someone to potentially build affordable housing units in an area that's already developed. So we're only trying to capture affordable units there. If nothing happens, if nobody comes forward and looks to build those kinds of units, then no harm, no foul. That won't be a negative as far as Fair Share Housing Center. It's just, let's see what we can get if we can get it.
I think the concern, Michael, was that in order to create the incentive, the additional unit would only be available over the existing zoning if the additional unit was an affordable unit.
That's correct. That's correct.
So may I ask a question?
Sure.
In this overlay zone, does this truly give builders an incentive to come and do that?
I don't know. I mean, what we occasionally revisit the density or the terms. As a matter of fact, because you had an overlay zone in place that did not result in any affordable units, presumably it didn't, the old version. So what we did was we tweaked it a bit and tried to make it a little bit more economically feasible or attractive for someone to come in and do units. Now, if in 2025 we look back and we still don't have any affordable units being developed in the business district where the overlay is, then we may do a little bit more tweaking. But so as of right now, the court feels and Fair Share Housing Center feels that it's sufficiently attractive to developers for them to do that kind of housing.
And in the interim or after 2025, we're not fined or because we didn't do this or?
That's correct. Actually, one
If
thing
no
that
one comes forward, it doesn't negatively impact the borough.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, Fair Share Housing was pretty candid in its acknowledgement that when you have a borough like Stone Harbor, where property values are inherently high, it's difficult to get builders to want to build affordable housing because the profitability in building regular housing is much higher. So this was the compromise we struck, but there is no negative inference, and correct me if I'm wrong, to the borough if no one comes forward in that period of time and builds.
That's correct, none whatsoever. I also represent Beach Haven, and that town is in a similar situation, and, you know, they have an overlay over their business district, and chances of anybody coming forward are not very good, although there is one guy in that town that is an affordable housing advocate and a developer, so they may do something.
So in 2025, it's mandated that you come back and we tweak it again?
Well, we don't know what's going to happen if we assume that everything is the same when we get there to 2025. The person who succeeds me, hopefully, will, yes, there would be something that would be revisited. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you will need to make any changes. Because, you know, the chances of anybody coming forward and suing you on behalf of low and moderate income households is not great either, because of the property expenses here,
And
values.
the 2025 date, understand, is just the limit of where our builder's remedy protection extends. It goes to that point in time. So at that point in time, we can revisit it to extend it further. But at this juncture, we have protection from any builder's remedy suits up until that deadline date.
And that was the important thing, that we
Right.
would be subject to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and I wanted to add two things. One is, along those lines, we get a lot of calls from towns that for the last 40 years felt like there was no way anybody was gonna sue them. There's no land, you know, properties are too expensive, we're already inherently affordable, so that's both ends of the spectrum. If all it takes is one disgruntled developer who got an application denied, or the, you know, the planning board had no interest in moving forward with the application, and the first question they ask is, do they have an approved COA plan? All of a sudden, they become interested in providing affordable housing. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I should have said this first. Your fair share number, I don't remember what the top line fair share number, say, was 200. What we did was we did an analysis of vacant land in the town, and we determined that there is no realistic development potential for affordable housing in town right now. So your top line number, let's assume it's 200, was adjusted all the way down to 0. Now, what happens to the other 200 units that, you know, that you don't have to provide anymore? They call that the unmet need. And the unmet need is what we're going after with the overlay zones. It's like, we know that you can't create a realistic opportunity for anything more than 0, but let's try to capture some opportunities if we can for the unmet need. That's really what it comes down to.
So that's why we're adopting these ordinances, to demonstrate a good faith attempt to solicit and fulfill that unmet need.
That's correct. And the other two ordinances, one is, I think we're revising the affirmative marketing plan, the ordinance for that, and then the other one is, accessory apartment units, and that's just a minor amendment. And then the other thing, there's the overall affordable housing ordinance that the borough already had on the books. We're adding a provision, what they call the mandatory set-aside provision. And what that means is, not only in the business district, but if anywhere in town, some developer assembles property or decides to demolish a piece of property and build housing, if they intend to build 5 units or more, they're on notice that they have to provide 1 unit, 2 unit, depending on the percentage, in order for them to develop the 5 or more units. Now, the most important aspect of this is you have to remember, we're not rezoning the town so affordable housing is allowed everywhere. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're putting on notice developers that if they decide they want to go down that route, if they do 5 or more, they're gonna provide at least 1 affordable unit. Second thing everybody has to understand is the planning board or the zoning board of adjustment still has to grant the variance that they would naturally have to request for that, because there's no zoning in the rest of the borough for multifamily housing like that. So this is not opening the door on anything that would otherwise just not be open. It's another one of those, hey, let's capture affordable housing opportunities if they present themselves. So, and every one of my towns that has this vacant land adjustment has the mandatory set-aside ordinance too. So this is standard throughout the state.
And Michael, that set-aside unit can appear in the form of senior housing, veterans housing, any number of...
Well, there's a provision in the Fair Housing Act now that allows for a veteran's preference, which they did not have until, I think, 2011. And if a developer is going to do a senior project, there would have to be a senior affordable unit or more provided.
And the accessory apartments are not just in the overlay zone, they're throughout town?
That's correct.
Okay.
Same, and it's the same concept. If somebody decides that they have an oversized garage that has an apartment over the top and they want to deed restrict it for 10 or 30 years, which frankly doesn't happen, you can capture an affordable unit credit through that program too. And it's just like the rehab programs that a lot of towns have. If nobody comes forward, it's not a negative reflection on the borough. You advertise for it. If they come forward, great. And if they don't, you tried.
So if anybody develops a third floor for affordable housing, that's deed restricted in some manner?
They would have to deed restrict it. At least one of the units.
And just so you guys know, the question that he's referring to that I had asked before the meeting was, since a third floor is being permitted in the overlay zone, does that mean that someone could theoretically simply build one unit and take advantage of the third floor provision? And the answer is no. In order to take advantage of the third floor provision, you would have to do the 5 units.
That's correct.
And one of them be the affordable housing.
That is clearly the intent of that provision, absolutely.
Anybody else? He's in front of us. Now's your chance. Ask any question.
Nobody wants to complain about the Mount Laurel doctrine in general? I usually get that.
We would like to, yes.
I think we're past that at this point.
Yes.
I would just like to ask about and I guess this is the document that we're referring to, but the section in here about the rehabilitation program.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about, it's our choice to participate in Cape May County affordable housing or
Correct.
have our own rehabilitation program.
That's correct.
Which is it that we do?
The county does not have a program, so we would have to run it ourselves. That's one of the things that we actually hired Triad to work with us on the apartments and the rehab.
So the rehabilitation program then, since we don't have any affordable units in the borough now, so there is no rehabilitation, because there's nothing to rehabilitate, correct? Is that-
Somebody could actually apply.
Similar
if
to
they
what I
need-
was saying before on these other things. You create the program, you affirmatively market it according to the rules, you have to advertise, whatever, and it's also not just in the borough, not just in the county either, it's a region, so you have to do your advertising throughout the region. I think this is Cape May, and I want to say Atlantic and Cumberland or whatever. There's usually 3 counties in a region. So if nobody comes and responds to the advertising, as long as you do it right, again, no negative inference drawn. And honestly, these rehab programs, especially for the shore towns, you may be correct. There may not be any units in town where an affordable household is living in it and it needs a major system repaired or replaced, like a roof, the windows, electrical. Chances are there is nobody like that here. But if there is, you advertise. If they come forward, great. If they don't, that's fine too.
That's interesting. Anybody else have anything more?
Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Do you want me to stay or?
Well, you know what, we do have some time left in the work session. It's the last thing on the agenda. So I will open it up to the public while we have our co-counsel here in front of us. If anybody has a question they would like to ask, they can come up to the podium.
just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Kathy Pikowski with Triad Associates. We'll be happy to work as your administrative agent. Just briefly, the administrative agent, we kind of come in on the end. Once you've done all your negotiating, your plans are set, and you've settled with everybody, we'll be the administrative agent that will actually help implement the program. So we will walk you through the whole process for both the accessory apartment program and the housing rehab program. We'll explain to you and how we'll do outreach to potential landlords or property owners for the accessory apartment program, how the units will be marketed, how the potential tenants that will live in the units will be qualified. They're individually qualified and then referred, to the landlords for credit checks and leases, et cetera. And then signed up. We'll work with you on explaining how the housing rehab program would be done, who would be eligible, and the kind of work that will be eligible for. That's basically, I just wanted to introduce myself.
Thank you.
If you have any quick questions.
Anybody have any questions for Triad? No, thank you. Anybody in the public? Any questions while we have these folks right here with us? Okay.
Thank you.
We have nothing more on our agenda for the work session. However, and the clerk hates when we do this, we do have a closed session on the regular meeting. So we could do our closed session now rather than at the end of the work session, if everybody's in favor of that.
So moved.
Okay. So let me find that.
You need a motion?
I need a number. I just want to make sure the clerk's not too annoyed with me. What's my resolution number?
What's the, you need,
Let's see.
Here.
You need your play.
19S180.
So the, because, all right, because the first resolution is,
It's 190.
182. And we'll have to change all the police stations.
well,
Well, we're going to have to use it for this.
right, because this goes before it, so each one of the resolutions, we'll just add 1, 2. So, resolution, wait a minute, hold on. Okay. At this time, we're about to consider a resolution to go into private session. We would appreciate it if you would all remain seated until the resolution has been acted upon. At the conclusion of the private session, we will come back into public session for the purpose of either taking action as a result of our discussion in private session or to simply adjourn. It is also possible that someone might bring up some other item of business in public session after we come back from private session. Resolution 2018 S-182.
Mayor and council, I offer resolution 2018-S-190, 182 for adoption.
Any discussion?
second.
And this is a matter related to the purchase, lease, sale, or acquisition of real property with public funds. Clerk, call the roll.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Lane?
Yes.
Mrs. Rich?
Yes.
Mrs. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Kraftcheck?
Yes.
Mr. Parzak?
Yes.